Happy New Year, everyone. 2024, my goodness. That's by one calendar anyway. I'm sure it's another year on many other calendars. But anyway, here's a God of new beginnings. And so I thought it was appropriate for us to have a visit uh, from and a visit about uh, Ganesha, sort of to bless us all at the beginning of what is likely to be a very significant year in the world. Anyway, isn't this a beautiful? I've got quite a few Ganeshas. Uh, People know that I'm sort of a Ganesha nut. Uh, and but Constance reminded me this morning about new beginnings and things like that. And we were talking about the initiatory process, uh, someone's personal initiatory progress. You can get initiated into the Boy Scouts or the or whatever at the beginning, and they all have their rules, or the Masons or the AA. And you usually think of it in terms of what they call the serpent of wisdom. You start at the bottom of the tree. I'm a probationer, or I'm a neophyte, okay, and my journey begins at the bottom of the tree of life. But the tree of life runs in two directions at the same time. There's the serpent of wisdom that climbs backwards up the Hebrew alphabet to the top. And then there is the lightning flash that begins at the top and uses the 10 Sephiroth as their landmarks or plateaus coming down. So there's lightning flash from 1 to 10. And then there's the serpent of wisdom from Tav back up to Aleph, or from the universe card to the Fool card. At the path that joins first little joining of 1 to 2. Anyway, and that's all fine and good. Okay. And when we begin, we usually think of terms of moving from my head at 10 to Godhead at 1. And that each of these are little plateaus of expanded consciousness as we go along. And those have been itemized. Oh, the Hindus have itemized things like this with painfully anal retentive detail. And Crowley's climb up the tree of life in the AA grades and everything. But even to think of it that way, even to think that the lightning flash and the climbing serpent of wisdom are two things, even to think of them as a two-part dynamic, you're already limiting yourself. It's an alternating current. It's happening simultaneously. And while it's all well and good, especially when you are looking at yourself as a student going through a learning process. Of course, there's a graduated program of steps and meditations and things. But the real initiation has happened when there isn't a two of anything. As a matter of fact, the second you start thinking in terms of higher, lower, unenlightened, enlightened, you've already screwed yourself. Okay? There is no time as we know it. You and me have already achieved supreme enlightenment. You and me have already, even sitting there right now, already dissolved into Godhead. It's nothing that's going to happen in the future. If we're thinking in terms of future, you've already weighed yourself down with bricks of an illusionary present. Crowley said something, and there was a post that was posted by, I believe, 418 Oasis OTO, and they posted it on Facebook, and I shared it. But I want to share it again. And Constance this morning she had me print this out a few days ago, and she's got it actually taped to the inside cupboard where she sees it 50 times a day in the kitchen. A man must think of himself as a logos. Now, logos is number 2 on the supernal triad of the tree of life. That is a magus. Okay. That is the first, that's Godhead that you can pretend to even talk about. Okay. And there's the logoses of the aeons, Buddha, people that announce the next big magical formula. But all of us are our own logos too. And we don't have to start a great world religion or anything like that, but we do the equivalent on a personal point of view. Every one of us, even jerks and assholes, perhaps even especially jerks and assholes. And Crowley says, a man must think of himself as a logos, as going, not as a fixed idea. Do what thou wilt is thus necessarily his formula. He only becomes himself when he attains the loss of egoity, of the sense of separateness. He becomes all, pan, when he becomes zero. Aleister Crowley. All sense of separateness. The idea that, the illusionary idea that you'd stop at the bottom and try to step by step include all things until there's nothing left to include. No, think of yourself as already enlightened, as already on the supernal triad, as already a logos. And everything is in you. You accept everything. You don't acquire everything. You accept everything unto yourself. And it doesn't seem like a climb. It doesn't seem like a step-by-step anything. When the light bulb of that realization hits, you have crossed the abyss. It's not something you do. It's something you wake up to what is. Well, anyway, back to Ganesha. I'm going to leave us with a New Year's Day invoking ceremony of Ganesha. And it is included in the book Low Magic. And I'm just going to do not going to do the whole thing. I'm going to do the whole little ritual for you, but not the whole lead up to it. I devised a mantra because I love Ganesha, okay, as a representative of the all, okay. You can't really, it's not a sectarian thing. Like my god's Ganesha and your god is Zeus, you know. Zeus and Ganesha, they have a fight on anime, you know. No, it's the same thing. To devotionally adore, to love, to set up that alternating current of love between you and the absolute deity, and the love of the absolute deity back to you, in order to kick off that alternating current, that feedback of love. It's helpful to say, okay, if God can be anything, and I want to kick on that love feedback thing, I want to do it with an image or a concept of a God that I can easily do that with. And it's easy for me to do it with Ganesha because he is just so goddamn cute, okay? It's easy for me to creep in my meditation into the throne room of this adorable, look at that. I just want to eat him alive, okay? I just want to be eaten alive, okay, at the same time, okay? I can easily see myself creeping into the throne room of Ganesha there, maybe like that little mouse, okay? And just feel so comforted. I can feel the love of the absolute singularity coming back to me in the guise of this happy little character. Now, I'm a magician and a Thelemite, and my religion is not bereft of gods. There's Nuit and Hadit and Babylon and the Rahur Kuit and the beast and all that stuff. All that stuff's, I get it, okay. And I understand the concepts, and I have no trouble projecting the absolute qualities to those images and concepts. But the vast, expanded night sky universe of Nuit, it's hard to get cozy with it. Okay, it's easier a little bit to get cozier with the stimulating Babylonian kind of thing, but it's and Hadith. I mean, I love Hadith. The secret center of my heart and my. But it's hard to get cozy. It's hard for me to kick on that love juice, the same kind of love juice that comes with the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. It's hard for me to kick that off with the inscrutable center of the cold, expanding universe, okay? But those same concepts I can easily wrap up into this little guy, and I can creep into his throne room, and I can crawl up and have him rock me to sleep in that trunk of his. Okay. Now you might have, well, I'm sure you do. You have your own image, if you will, that will kick on the juice for you. And I suggest you find that and then start to work with it. Because you're starting at the top. In the AA system, the Magus, when you reach number 2 on the tree of life, you become the logos. Okay, your word goes forth, and in a sense, you become a gardener, and all the things that your word can influence, all of the yous that were you as you filtered down into the number 10 are now your garden. You planted seeds. Those seeds are now nourished by the word that you are and have always been. And you don't worry about it. Okay. The concept is, well, now you're a gardener, but you don't care what grows, what you've done that grows or dies, because it's all the same. It's not like you've done what you're supposed to do. It's like you are now doing what you've always done. Okay, and it's from that realization. And so that makes the concept of crossing the abyss not a hard-working thing or something that you terribly, oh, I got a momentum of all my pranayama. It has to match the gravity of Bina, or number 3 on the tree of life. Don't worry about that. It's as fast as that. The second that you've accepted everything, it's all you. Man must think of himself as a logos, as going, not as a fixed idea. But anyway, so a classic rosary. Change the subject. I digress. Okay. Classic rosary is 108 beads, and there's all sorts of reason why 108 has always been sort of, especially in Hindu cultures, it's always been sort of a sacred number. And probably most of you are aware, or many of you, that in order for me to do an entire rosary of repetitions of Ganesha's name, or any deity, if you will, I just devised a concept of 4.5 rounds of the popular children's nursery rhyme melody of Pop Goes the Weasel. So it's Pop Goes Ganesha. Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha. Okay, that one full round of Pop Goes Ganesha is 24. Okay, so 4.5 rounds is 108. Okay, and it's easy to do. You can do it while you drive. You can do it with a rosary, you know. But most of all, you can keep track on your fingers. And it does all the classic things to you that a mantra does. Okay, mantras are like absolutely free, inexpensive spiritual drugs. Okay. But I devised a simple ritual whereby I not only banish my area, but then I follow up that banishing with an invocation of the all. And I can do it while driving, unless somebody is sitting next to me trying to engage me in conversation. Okay, in order for you to appreciate the simplicity of this little ritual, you need to understand the magical dynamics of how the magician moves about the temple in ritual in order to initiate and direct the flow of energy that either invokes or banishes a specific magical force. Invoking is with the sun, okay, clockwise. In order to invoke or bring in the desired magical force, the general magical rule of thumb in blocking of ritual movements, the general magical rule of thumb suggests that the magicians move about the temple in a clockwise direction. In other words, around the perimeter or circle of the temple space, moving from east to south to west to north, returning to the east. That's usually the order. This movement with the sun's apparent daily path is called deosil. Standing also, so that's one invoking thing. Also, standing in one place and spinning or rotating clockwise is also considered an invoking movement. Like that. Okay. The magician can also invoke by moving in a spiral pattern, starting at the circumference of the temple circle and moving inwardly until coming to rest in the center, as if you were pulling the force or entity into the center of the temple. Okay, so like that. You start at the you go clockwise, and you go just like Ganesh's trunk there, you go all the way to the center. Can you see how you're just sucking everything into your central self? That's invoking too. So that's invoking, and that's invoking. Do them at the same time. You're just doubling your power. Naturally, the power of this invoking movement is further amplified if the inward turning spiral was performed in a clockwise or deosil direction, and amplified even more if the magician was also performing deosil rotations while moving along the path of the inward turning spiral. Now, it's much easier to just actually do that once than it is to talk about it. It's just, you just do it once, you go, oh, I get it. Okay, I can do that forever. Now, banishing is against the sun. Conversely, in order to banish or send away, the general magical rule of thumb suggests movement about the temple in a counterclockwise direction. In other words, like east to north to west to south, returning to the east. This movement against the sun's apparent daily path is called widdershins. Standing in one place and spinning or rotating counterclockwise is also considered a banishing movement. Like that. By now you've probably surmised that you can also banish by moving in a spiral pattern, starting from the center and moving counterclockwise and moving, well, let's let DuQuette describe it here. By moving in a spiral pattern, starting from the center and moving widdershins outwardly until coming to rest at the far circumference of the circle, as if you were pushing everything out and away from the center of the temple. Naturally, the power of this banishing movement is further amplified if the outward turning spiral is also performed in a counterclockwise Widdershins direction, and strengthened even more if the magician is also performing Widdershins rotations while moving along the path of the outward turning spiral. So you start at the beginning and moving your way around, pushing everything out as if to banish. At the end of that, what have you done? You've created a cosmic vacuum. You've pushed everything out. That's a banishing. Purpose of a banishing in a ritual is to clear your area so you can start to work, so that you can one by one, item by item, let in exactly, exclusively what force that it is your will to bring into that. But first you got to vacuum the carpet before you can start the ritual. I call this little banishing invoking ceremony the Dance of Ganesha, and remind the reader, like most other magical rituals, it's much easier to actually perform and visualize than it is to read about. Part 1 is the banishing. The Dance of Ganesha, Liber 108, just for presumptuous pretense. Part 1, the banishing. The magician sits down in the center of the circle facing east, eyes closed. The entire ritual meditation is accomplished in the mind's eye. Once relaxed and settled, the magician formulates in the mind a tiny little living image of Ganesha, only standing in his colorful glory in the center of the magician's brain. Okay, can you do that? Just sit down, put him right in there, okay? Then the tiny Ganesha bursts forth from the brain and stands on the floor directly in front of the magician. Magically, the image of the deity has now grown to about 3 feet high. Ganesha begins to gracefully whirl Widdershins. So in other words, rotate. He starts to rotate counterclockwise. The image of a spinning Ganesha should bring delight into the heart of the magician. And that's another wonderful thing about using Ganesha as the surrogate to the singularity, is because almost anything he does in your imagination brings you an almost giddy feeling of joy. The magician now begins to chant the Pop Goes Ganesha mantra. While continuing to whirl Widdershins, or counterclockwise, Ganesha now begins to move Widdershins from the center of the circle, right in front of you. Okay, you're in the center. And he starts to move Widdershins in an outwardly spiraling circle around the magician. Okay, like that. Look in the center. So that Ganesh is doing that, and he's spinning around with his colorful clothes, and eventually comes to the very circumference of the circle. He's pushed the entire universe. The entire cosmos has been pushed away, and the magician is sitting smack dab in the middle of a cosmic vacuum. As the spiral takes Ganesha further and further away from the center and the seated magician, the image of the deity grows. So as he gets farther away from you, the image keeps growing so that you can always see him clearly. Okay? So he's only about 3 feet high when he's right in front of you. But by the time he reaches the outer perimeter of your room or your house, he's about 50 feet high. Okay, because you can see him quite clearly. By the time the chant has reached the end of the first half of the first verse, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha. Ganesh, 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 Ganesh. Oh, that's it. Ganesha's whirling spiral dance has brought him again directly in front of the magician. But now the spiral has carried him to the far eastern limits of the entire temple room. The image of Ganesha is now about 12 feet tall. By the time the chant has reached the end of the second half of the first verse, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha. By the time you get to that, that's one full verse. Ganesha's whirling spiral dance brings him again directly in front of the magician. But now the spiral has carried him to the far eastern limits of the continent. Okay, remember, these spirals are like the golden mean, because it only takes a few times around you to get that golden spiral. That same thing we talked about the other day, that's the source of the Nautilus shell and everything. He only has to get around you a few times before the spiral is so big it takes the entire continent of North America. The image of Ganesha is now many thousands of miles tall. By the time the chant has reached the end of the first half of the second verse, Ganesha's whirling spiral dance has now encompassed the sphere of the earth and the orbit of the moon. The image of Ganesh is now hundreds of thousands of miles tall. By the time the chant has reached the end of the second half of the second verse, Ganesha's whirling spiral dance has encompassed the sun and the orbits of all the planets in our solar system. Ganesha is now many millions of miles in size. And remember, creating a vacuum, if you will, with you as the center. By the time the chant has reached the end of the first half of the third verse, the dance has enclosed, enclosed the Milky Way. And Ganesha is now hundreds of thousands of light years in stature. And that's now how big the vacuum of your aura is. By the time the chant has reached the second half of the third verse, Ganesha's spiral dance has circumscribed the local group of galaxies in the neighborhood of the Milky Way. Ganesha is now millions of light years in size. And you can still see him. You can still see him. That big. Can you imagine what that is doing to your sense of space-time? Can you see what that is doing even to your meat brain? By the time the chant has reached the end of the first half of the fourth verse, Ganesha's dance has reached so far into space that the Milky Way and our local group of galaxies looks merely like one fuzzy star in the midst of billions of other star galaxy groups. Ganesha is billions of light years in size. By the time the chant has reached the end of the second half of the fourth verse, Ganesha's spiral dance has pushed the physical universe to to its inscrutable limits. There is no beyond. There is no size bigger. Space has been transcended. There is no beyond. There is no size bigger. space has been transcended. The concept of the center and circumference has been obliterated. The concept of there is only the infinite immensity of Ganesha and the infinite smallness of the magician seated in the deity's dimensionless center. The Lambic magicians would say, "Ah, you have achieved Hadit in the body of Nuit." The banishing is complete. Part 2, the invocation. The magician has now chanted 4 complete verses of Pop Goes Ganesha. During those 4 verses, the ever-growing image of a dancing Ganesha has banished or pushed away the entire universe by whirling widdershins in a counterclockwise spiral until it has reached the limits of space-time. There is no more universe left for the now infinitely immense Ganesha to circumscribe. No outside of itself. Not even empty space. When the magician has grasped the absolute immensity of this idea, he or she is now ready to invoke. The infinitely large image of Ganesha standing before the magician now begins to gracefully spin clockwise. During the first 4 lines of the chant remaining, the spinning Ganesha will move in very short inward clockwise arcs until it enters into the magician's right ear. Ganesh, 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 and it pops in your right ear. During the second of the 4 lines of the chant remaining, the spinning Ganesh moves in a very short inward clockward arc until it enters the back of the magician's skull. This movement completely drags the second quarter of the cosmos and with it deposits it in the magician's own head. Ganesh, Ganesh, Ganesha. During the third of the 4 lines of the chant remaining, the spinning Ganesha moves in a very short inward clockwise arc until it enters the magician's left ear. This movement completely drags the third quarter of the cosmos with it and deposits it inside the magician's own head. Ganesh, Ganesh, Ganesha. And you guessed it. During the fourth and final of the 4 lines of the chant remaining, the spinning Ganesha moves in a very short inward clockwise arc until it enters the magician's forehead. This movement completely drags the remaining cosmos with it and deposits it in the magician's own head. For a golden moment, the magician is Ganesha, the supreme intelligence, the great G. There is no outside of the magician. The invocation is complete. How's that for a New Year's Day start? Anyway, I kept you too long and rambled on enough. I wish you the very best in 2024. Our our love and our blessings go out to this morning, the earthquake in Japan, the troubles in the Middle East and in Russia and Ukraine, and all of those things. But if there's ever going to be peace in the world, it's got to start. It's got to start with you. And so we'll see you tomorrow, I hope. Until then, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. How'd I do? Oh, yeah, that was okay.